Hi, I'm Dawn Montefusco, and this is Write Your True Story, how to use your story to grow your business, inspire millions, and leave a legacy. And today I have truly one of my greatest heroes, Gay Hendricks. Gay Hendricks has served for more than 30 years as one of the major contributors to the fields of relationship transformation and body-mind therapies. Along with his wife, Dr. Kathleen Hendricks, Gay is the author of many bestsellers, including Conscious Loving, At the Speed of Life, Conscious Breathing, The Big Leap, and 5 Wishes. Dr. Hendricks received his PhD in counseling psychology from Stanford in 1974. After a 21-year career as a professor at University of Colorado, he founded the Hendricks Institute, which offers seminars in North America, Asia, and Europe. Hi, Gay.
Hi, Dawn. Good to be with you.
So great to be here. Well, how about you tell us a little bit about you, what you do, which seems like a funny question to ask, and any new projects you're working on.
Fantastic. Well, I send you greetings from Kathleen, also known as Katie. She's in Europe this week. So I'm taking care of our 2 cats here at home in Ojai, California. In fact, they're in the room. You probably can't see them behind me, but they'll probably make an appearance on camera. We have 2 little British short-haired girls named Greta and Allie that like to get on camera sometimes by jumping up on my shoulders and things. Mostly at this stage of the game, I enjoy, after racking up about 1.2 million frequent flyer miles, I'm trying to spend more of my time here in my magnificent home. And we just got back from a trip to Asia where we were gone for 8 days, but now I'm here for a while and I'm really enjoying being home for a while. So I mostly write books, and I just, in fact, a big announcement I can make on your show, which is that I just finished the sequel to The Big Leap and sent it in to the publisher.
You did? I'd heard rumors, but I had no idea.
I know. I feel like I've been sitting on an ostrich egg, for about 6 months. And so finally here it is. And I'm very excited about that. So I can't tell you the title of it yet or much about it because I'm sworn to secrecy by the publisher, but make sure you ping me next September when the book is published, and I'll come back on your show and talk to you about it.
Oh, you have no idea. I will. One of the things that I love about The Big Leap, and I want to tell everyone about this. Well, first, I literally it's mandatory reading in my coaching practice. I've been coaching for 10 years on life purpose and career. And then naturally, I have an MFA in writing. I taught writing, went into teaching or coaching men and women over 40 who are writing their true stories and their memoirs specifically to inspire or grow their business through attraction, through true authenticity. So it's not that kitschy marketing slang you hear out there. This is a real mission for me. And your book was fascinating because as soon as I opened it, though you were telling your true story to your readers, I was certain you were writing it to me.
Thank you. That's a good compliment to pay a writer.
And it was phenomenal how easy that feeling became. And then as I read it further and now doing this summit, I'm realizing you were very vulnerable and incredibly vulnerable and authentic in your story that you wrote to literally help others. So my question is, how has that level of authenticity and vulnerability helped you attract your tribe, the people that really, they say the teacher appears when the student is ready, that kind of thing. And it's that kind of authenticity and vulnerability that did that. So how has that helped you?
Well, let me tell you the story of how that happened, because up until age 24, I was a very different person than I was after the age of 24, because when I was 24, I had a big wake-up moment where I realized I was doing everything wrong in my life. I ate the wrong food. I weighed 100 pounds more than I weigh now. I weigh 185 pounds and I'm a little over 6 feet tall. So I'm a,
Wow.
you
Yeah.
know,
You look great.
athletic looking person. But at that time I weighed 100 pounds more. I was a very obese person. I also wore big, thick glasses and I puffed away on 2 or 3 packs of cigarettes a day. And I was in a job I didn't like. And I was in a relationship I was not happy with, and everything. I was just ripe for a big life change.
Hmm.
And I went out one day for a walk to kind of clear my head after a big argument. And I slipped on the ice and kind of went whoomp down on my back. And I didn't knock myself out, but I kind of knocked myself out of myself
Yes.
because there was about 2 minutes where I lay there on the ice and I had a vision of who I really was and how I wasn't living my own life.
Wow.
And I realized I was laying there and it was as if I could see down through all the levels of myself. I could see that my 100 pounds of fat was covering up all of these feelings that
Yes.
I didn't know how to feel. I didn't understand them. I was scared about some things and angry about and sad about some things, but I didn't know how to deal with that. And so I ate and smoked and everything kind of to distract myself.
Totally.
And so that was a huge wake up moment for me, because here's what happened. When I was coming back out of that, I was laying there and finally I realized I'm cold and I'm starting to shiver. And I was about 2 miles from where my house was, so I had to walk all the way back. So whoomp, um, I as I was getting back to my feet, I realized I want to feel that open spaciousness in every moment of my life,
Wow.
because I'd seen down through all the levels of myself and I saw that what was at the center of me and everyone else was an open space of pure consciousness. That it didn't matter if I was in New Hampshire and you were in California, or you were a Muslim and I was a Buddhist. It didn't matter, that underneath everything there was this pure consciousness
Wow.
that was where all human beings were connected. And I had never realized that until this moment.
Wow.
And so as I was coming back into standing up again, I made this vow. I said, I'm going to do whatever it takes to feel that way in every moment of my life.
Mm.
And so you talk about magic happening,
Yeah.
you know, how the teacher opens up when the student is ready.
Totally.
So the next day, I was trying to figure out, how am I going to do this? What am I going to eat? You know, all of these things, because I felt my life was so changed. A friend of mine called me up and he said, hey, I'm going to visit an old professor of mine at Harvard who has just been to India, and he's come back and he's a very different person. And I want to go hang out with him and see what it's all about. This was in the year of 1969, by
I
the
know
way.
who you're going to say.
Exactly. So
No way.
I'd never done a yoga posture or anything like
What?
that. But it turned out to be Ram Dass, who had
That's
just come back from India.
amazing.
And so he's got his robes on, and it was a trip. And I had never, I mean, it was, look, I didn't have any context to put it in. You know, I'd
Yeah.
never seen a yogi in a robe and everything.
Yeah.
Plus, the other thing, he had all these disciples around him, all these beautiful young people. And when we walked into the place, these girls came up with these long Indian outfits on and handed us fruit, you know, and I'm thinking, what is this?
Yeah.
Well, but I listened to Ram Dass and he spoke for 3 hours
Wow.
without any notes. And I remember, see, I was a teacher at a school for delinquent boys at the time. And I never went into class without all my notes and my lesson plans and everything like that. And it just made me so in awe of him that he could sit there and talk for 3 hours.
Oh.
And he would occasionally just stop, and occasionally he would look at a picture of his guru, and then he'd kind of catch another wave and he'd talk and talk and talk. And that was astounding to me. It wasn't so much what he said, it was that the way he was speaking about it. It was speaking from his heart. And I had never seen that before. So I went up to him afterwards and I said, look, I don't know anything about this whole trip you're on, but you obviously have got some wisdom. So if you look at me right now, what would you suggest that I do to really move fast in changing my life? And he sort of looked at me and he said, you know what you ought to do? you ought to do some breathing exercises.
Oh, no way.
And I said, breathing exercises, what do you mean? And he said, well, in India, like if you have a problem, you might sit there and breathe with it for a while or do some yoga postures. Or you necessarily wouldn't go to a therapist. Here
Yeah.
we might go to a therapist, but there they might just breathe with it or go to a yogi and have them work with it in their body. And to me, that sounded like he was speaking some foreign language. And I said, where would I find something like this? You know, what book should I read? And so he said, well, just pay attention and something will come to you.
No way.
Cool. So I was kind of mystified by that. But the next day I went to the grocery store and I was at the checkout counter with my cart, and I looked over to the left. And in those days, it was common to have a little kiosk of paperback books where you checked out, because in those days, paperback books either cost 65 cents or 95 cents.
Oh,
The
wow.
really
Yeah.
the big ones were like 95 cents. And so I looked over, and there's one of those 95-cent books, and it was called Yoga, Youth, and Reincarnation.
No.
And I said, wow. And so I picked it up, and what it was an entire book of yoga, breathing activities, meditations, just one after the other, one after the other. It was like a little textbook on how to do all those things.
Yeah.
So let it come to me. So I went home that afternoon, and I just started working my way through the book. I did the yoga stuff first, and then I got into the breathing activities, and then I did the meditation. So I was doing it straight through the book. So I started about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and by midnight, whoa, you know, I was really zooming. And then I got to the meditation part, and I did this meditation that was in the book. It was just something very simple, like saying Om, Om, Om to yourself. But what happened was I had that same kind of transcendental experience that I'd had on the ice. When I
Yeah.
slipped on the ice, there was that open, spacious consciousness that I could see underneath all the thoughts in my mind. So that really started me off on my journey. And within a year, I'd lost 100 pounds and dropped the cigarette addiction and got out of the relationship. And actually, my vision even changed. I could pass my driver's license without my glasses for the first time.
That's
So
amazing.
it was a big life change. And so I really dedicated, I figured if I'd continued the way I was going, I would have been dead within a couple of years, I think.
Yeah.
And so ever since then, I felt like I've been on vacation because I was given this second life. And now here, even though it's 50 years later from the moment I fell on the ice, I feel still like I'm eating dessert every day,
Oh,
on vacation every day.
your energy is like you're 23 years old. I mean, I'm like, wow, I could barely keep up with you, I'm sure.
Well, good. Well, we're redefining what it means to be in
It's
your
true.
70s these days.
It's true. And your book is part of that, actually, The Big Leap.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, and wait till you read this new one. It won't be out till the fall, but I am really excited because I think it's really going to take everybody to a whole different level. If you think The Big Leap was a whoosh, wait till you hit whoosh
Oh
with
my
this
gosh.
big
So
new
how
book.
long after that did you like formulate this idea that I'll let the audience know a little bit of is basically it's the extending of feeling good, that we have this limitation, this idea of how good we can feel. There's the zone of incompetence.
Yes.
It's zone of incompetence, competence, excellence, and genius, correct?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, the new book has a lot to do with how to stabilize yourself in your genius, what I call the genius spiral now.
Right.
And yes, the big leap was a lot about how to overcome your upper limit problems so that you can feel good for longer periods of time and have longer periods of intimacy in your relationships. I started figuring that out. When did it? I think it was in the early 70s when it was after the Ram Dass experience and everything. And when I moved to California in 1971, I was getting my PhD at Stanford in counseling psychology. And so I had a lot more opportunity to think about these kinds of things. And I started noticing the upper limit problem then. I started noticing that I would get along well with my new girlfriend for, a week, and then we'd have an argument, or I'd get along with her great for 2 weeks, and then we'd have an argument. And it was kind of like, we would going up this hill and then we'd slip back, and then we go up the hill and slip back. And suddenly it occurred to me one day that I had some sort of upper limit governor on how good I could let myself feel and how much love I could let myself experience. And I would come up to that governor and it would push me back down. And so I started looking at that and started working with that in my clients. And that was where the whole upper limit thing came from, which led me ultimately to write The Big Leap.
That's amazing. That, it's funny when I read it, what I love, and I want to say this to everyone out there so they get this, is that you actually track the history. You have a brief part of it where you track the history in the macro of the human condition, and then you bring it into the micro in terms of war and peace, that we have to have war, then we have to have peace. And then you go into the micro of of each and every person's life. And I recall a time where my father found a poem. I'm a writer and a poet. And the poem was, I was embarrassed that he found it. I was like 10 years old. And it was, Can I Stay Happy was the name of the poem. And I was writing, I don't really remember it, but my dad found it, and he's a great dad. He taught me in story. He sat down, Italian American, looks like Al Pacino, and he sits there and says, "Hey kid, I got something to tell you." And I said, "What?" He goes, "This whole happy thing, it doesn't last very long." He says, "What I want you to be is I want you to be comfortable in contentment, because you can be content for long periods of time. But I don't know about this happy thing." And it was when I read your book, it occurred to me my programming was so obvious, and I've had to move past that programming. And I think you say, it's incremental, right? You just try to extend it just a little more and a little more.
Right. Well, at first, you really need to think of it as, well, you talked about the macro and the micro. Just what I saw when I started figuring out the upper limit problem was that whole cultures go through that, because it's almost like humanity is allergic to peace, because we'll experience a little bit and then the allergy will come up and we'll start a war. And same thing happens in marriages and businesses. And, you can almost see sometimes a business hit its upper limit and then things begin to fall apart. The Roman Empire ruled from sundown to sunset everywhere you looked, and then all of a sudden, a few hundred years, it didn't, and these things happen to cause these empires to break down. And the same kind of thing happens with us as individuals. So I really think that what we all need to do is dedicate ourselves to also building up increments of our genius. And around here, in our seminars, we have people start with just 10 minutes a day.
Oh, I love that.
You actually put it in your calendar, though. Like from 4:20 to 4:30 tomorrow afternoon, I'm going to focus on my genius. And you put it in your calendar, because if you don't, a lot of times people will forget it. But even if you only go in your room and sit there for 10 minutes just saying, what is my genius? What is my genius? Even if nothing comes to you, at least you've devoted 10 minutes to your genius. And the reason I take 10 minutes is because I know if you'll spend 10 minutes there for a week, you're going to start wanting to spend 15 or 20. And then pretty soon you're going to want to spend an hour. And to me, when I first started thinking about all this, I was only spending less than 10% of my time in my zone of genius doing what I most love to do. And boy, did that set me back. Suddenly I said, wow, we've got to do better than that. And so I set the goal of first having 30% of my waking hours devoted to my genius. It took me a couple of years to hit that, but then I said, okay, I'm there. Now let me set 50%. So half my waking hours devoted to genius. That took me a few years because I was still a university professor. And at the university, we have to have these long meetings on super important subjects like close-in parking and the lack of faculty football team tickets and things like that.
Let's so the zone of genius, from what I remember, is actually what you're uniquely positioned for or put on earth for, that actually brings you joy. There's a sense of joy and a unique purpose in your zone of genius, correct?
Yes, I now call it the genius spiral, though, because a zone makes it sound too much like it's a place, whereas really it's an evolving
Agreed.
thing all the time. And so it's the one place where you can't get stuck. You know, you can get stuck in your zone of incompetence doing things you're no good at, and you can get stuck in your zone of competence doing things you're good at, but somebody else could do just as well.
Totally.
And people can really get stuck in their zone of excellence because there you're doing stuff you're good at. People love you for doing it. You make money doing it. People pat you on the back, say, "Atta girl, atta boy." But you know down in your heart that if you keep doing that, you're not going to be happy.
Yes.
Because in life, you really have to be evolving your relationship with your creativity all the time.
Oh.
Otherwise, you feel a kind of a stagnation inside.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't want any human being on earth to feel that kind of stagnation.
No, it's a sadness. It's a sadness. I really equate it with sad. When I'm feeling this like undefinable sadness, I realize that I'm in excellence, but I haven't been practicing my zone of genius. I have an interesting question. So being from, academia and obviously being revered for what you were doing in your zone of excellence, were you afraid or nervous about sharing your personal stories in this book?
No.
I love it. I love it. I knew you were going to say that.
Well, also, I had published a book earlier in 1982 called Learning to Love Yourself.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And that was the first one I really wrote from my heart with my own experience and everything. And it was really a big breakthrough book for me. And it also got one of the worst reviews. There was a magazine at the time called Psychology Today that was very popular. And it was at the beginning of the self-help book movement. There weren't really many self-help books that had been written. And oh boy, did I catch it from Psychology Today. They had this thing where they said, Dr. Hendricks, a formerly respected academic psychologist, has now started sharing his feelings with the world, but anyway, interestingly enough, that's turned in over the years to be one of my biggest bestsellers and actually led to us being on Oprah for the first time.
Nice.
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting thing that happened. My wife and I, Katie, she and I went to Hawaii one time on vacation back in the late 1980s. And just as I was getting off the plane, I got a call from my secretary back in Colorado saying, "Hey, there's something that sounds interesting and I want to see if you want to do it. There's this woman named Oprah Winfrey, and they're calling from a show she has out in Chicago, and they're calling to find out if you want to come on and talk about your book, Learning to Love Yourself." And so I literally left Colorado where it was about 20 degrees, and I'm standing there on the runway, in the airport, going into the airport talking, it was in the very early days of cell phones. Remember, I don't know if you remember these, but they looked the size of a banana, kind of. So I've got my banana there on, and I had not heard of her at the time, and of Oprah, because I didn't watch much TV at the time, and so I said, "Oh gosh, it's 80 degrees here. I don't want to get back on a plane and fly back to Chicago." And I said, "Send my regrets." So I may become the first self-help book author in history to turn down an opportunity to be on Oprah.
Oh my gosh.
But anyway, they didn't hold it against me, because then a few years later, when Conscious Loving came out, right away they had Katie and me on one time, and then they reran that show, and then they had us on another time. So it started a great relationship. And in those days also, they would rerun the Oprah show all over the world. And so we could always tell where an Oprah show of ours was rerunning, because, like we'd suddenly see a spike in our book sales in Hamburg, Germany, or Mumbai, India. And so, but anyway, that was I always say that we went overnight from working with 6 couples in our living room to working with 10 million people on
Yeah.
Oprah. And kind of the rest of our lives went into high gear as a result of that.
So the first book, though, were you at least like when you did get criticized about sharing your feelings, God forbid, um, was there, were you just like fed up with the industry? Like, no, this is the way this is gonna go. I see my path. This is happening. Or were you a little bit like, oh God, I gotta have dinner with, some colleagues, and this is gonna get a little sticky.
No, actually, I did get a little guff from my colleagues, but I'll tell you, even at a university, there's nothing like success, because
I was
once
gonna
I got a
say,
few bestsellers out there,
totally.
they were interested in hanging on to me. I didn't have to worry about getting in trouble with them. Um, so I just kept publishing a book a year, and that made me kind of invincible in the academic world and allowed me to do whatever I wanted to do. And in fact, I ended up having a wonderful career there, because eventually I got so I could they'd let me teach pretty much any course I wanted to teach. I even taught courses on cable TV and that kind of thing. So I was able to do a lot of innovative teaching there.
What do you love about sharing your personal stories in your books? I mean, you really, like I said, I feel like you're speaking to me. I know I've heard that from other people. You've sort of mastered it to some degree in like, it's very natural for you to say, hey, this is what I know. This is what I want to share.
Well, I feel also that I come from a research background. When I was originally at Stanford, we did research, and I was originally trained as a research psychologist, where you're supposed to take, let's say you teach something to 40 people and then you administer some tests to them. So that's one way of doing it, but I always thought it would be so much more valuable to go deeply into one person's
Yeah,
experience. And so I said, since nobody's doing that, I'm going to do that myself.
nice.
And I was really helped at the time also. I've always been a writer. Ever since I was a kid, I was always writing little stories. And my mom was a newspaper columnist for her
Oh, that's
career. And so everybody around the family is used to hitting a deadline, and I grew up with my mother typing in the background, with a Camel cigarette hanging out of her mouth and a cup of coffee next to her, bang, 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 on her old Underwood typewriter. So um, I'm kind of a writer by birth. But Dwight Webb, who was one of my professors at the University of New Hampshire when I was getting my master's in counseling there, had this amazing suggestion. I talked to him one day and I said, I really love writing, and I've always wanted to write novels, but I also love counseling, and what should I do? And he said, this is really a great suggestion. He said, why don't you do both? Why don't you use your writing skills to write about things that happen in the transformation process?
wow.
And so like a light went on, and it's the richest subject of all.
Yeah.
Uh, by the way, in recent years, I've started writing mystery novels,
Oh,
and I've written published half a dozen mystery novels so far. And I have a big piece of news to share that I just sold 5 of my mystery novels to Netflix to turn into a television series.
oh my God, that's so cool.
Yes, I write mysteries about a Tibetan Buddhist private detective in Los Angeles named Tenzing Norbu. And all of the books, his nickname is Ten for Tenzing. And all of the books have 10 in the title, like the first rule of 10, the second rule of 10, the
Oh,
third
this
rule
is
of 10.
fantastic.
Yeah, and so I'm very excited because we're working on a television series over there.
Look at this. I love flow. I love how when you had that moment, you embraced it and kept that kind of flow going. And again, following what you love, sharing your life, that kind of thing. One of the things that I love is that you do follow, I mean, in the way that you write about your personal journey, you do follow the path of that hero's journey. That what I love is in true story, in memoir, can look all kinds of different ways. I mean, we can make it up in fiction, but when you come to that familiarity, right? We love to hear that is the favorite story of everyone, right? I think,
Mhm.
and you do it so naturally, but with surprises, because we like the familiar, but we love surprise. um do you see that the hero's journey maybe just repeats itself and gives us opportunity to recognize it more and more and more, and then to share it.
Yes, that's why I like the image of the spiral,
Yes,
because
yes,
as you go up the spiral gets bigger and bigger and bigger as you take on bigger and bigger and bigger things in life, and as you prove more to yourself your own mastery, then it's natural to take on bigger and bigger projects. And so there's kind of an ascent of
yeah,
the spiral that happens as you open up more to your own inner depths, because as you open up more to your inner depths, then you get the energy to do more on the outside.
yes.
So I'm very much of an inside out
Oh, I
kind
love
of
that.
person.
Okay, so next question is perfect. What advice would you give to someone? I have these beautiful clients doing big things, and they don't mind speaking about it, and they don't mind teaching it, and they don't even mind putting it on their websites a little bit. But when it comes to actually sharing their journey in writing, actually writing their true story, they get scared of, because somehow they feel like it's more permanent. It's they're going to be judged. They're nervous. And then oftentimes, if you can get them through that block, it's the opposite. It means when they love it, they attract the people they want to attract. Any advice to the person who's nervous about sharing their true story?
One of the things I talk about in The Big Leap is what I call the fear of outshining,
Oh,
which
that's
is a lot of people, especially if they've grown up with brothers and sisters, they have a fear of outshining and really taking up the full space, with the erroneous limiting belief that if I take up my full space, it will take it away from
yeah.
somebody else. If I shine, it will take away the shine from someone else. And so they keep their shine tucked in. And
Definitely.
so one of the things to let you know if you suffer from that is that that's a thinking error, that your shining will cause problems for other people. Let
Yes,
it change that belief to, when I shine, it inspires other people to shine,
absolutely,
because that's really the truth of the matter.
absolutely.
Yeah, and so I think that's one part of it. Um, I think also too that most people don't know yet what their true genius is, because they haven't sat there for 10 minutes and really encountered themselves and said, what is it that above all I most love to do?
Yeah.
And what is it that when I do it, I lose track of time? So those kind of questions are the way to guide yourself into your genius.
Mm.
And there's nothing more important, because at the end of the day, you know, we're all going to die someday. And if I come by and visit you on your deathbed and I say, hey, Dawn, um, was your life a total success? And you say, yeah, it was. And I say, what made it a total success? You're going to say several things. You know, you're going to tell me what made it a success. And those are the things that all of them have to do with your genius.
Yes.
You know, like to me, if
Yes.
you ask me that, I would say unhesitatingly, the number one sign that my life was an absolute success is because I created a loving relationship with a woman with whom I could grow and change over, so far, almost 40 years.
I've heard you say that. I love that. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that if a person with a PhD in counseling psychology can't learn to get along great with one person, he ought to send it back to Stanford. So I think we all need to have a heart-to-heart conversation with ourselves and say, what are the 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 things that are absolutely of sacred importance for me to experience or to express in my life? And when you talk about creativity, it doesn't have to be writing a symphony or writing a book or something like that. It could be the way you go about making a favorite soup,
Oh,
or it
absolutely.
could be the way you cuddle a newborn.
Oh,
There's something though in the, always ask yourself, what is it I most love to do? Because that will always get you up on the genius spiral.
the other thing that I notice is that when people do tap in and they find out what they love to do, they can't help but tell everybody they love to do it.
It's really true. Um, you know, there's a great philosopher, French philosopher named Blaise Pascal. He said that all of our problems as human beings come from the inability to sit in a room by ourselves for 10 minutes doing nothing.
Agreed.
And that's where I got this first idea. If people will just spend 10 minutes one day asking themselves, what is my genius? 10 minutes another day. By the end of that first week, your life is going to be totally different. But you got to put it in your calendar and you got to make yourself doing it at first.
Agreed. Agreed. So, fun question to ask. Would your life be where it is today if you decided not to share your true stories?
No, I would be probably living in a small room down at the harbor over a cotton candy shop, eating most of the cotton candy underneath. See, on a serious note, a good many issues that people have come from not expressing their true creativity.
Agreed. Absolutely.
You know, that if I look around the planet, well, like I said, I've been around the world 30 some times now, and a million some frequent flyer miles, and my wife actually has more, 1.5 million frequent flyer miles. But as I go around the world, I mean, I certainly see poverty and poor standards of living, but what I see that's really making people unhappy is unexpressed creativity. That
Absolutely.
their creativity is their soul, and your soul, if it gets thwarted and isn't brought forth, then of course you're going to be miserable, and it's going to show up everywhere.
So that's a huge point. I mean, it's a pandemic, you know, in at least American culture. I can't speak for other cultures, and we don't give it like, you know, it's like my mother. You know, what are you gonna do with that? Oh, you're gonna be a poet, you know? And I was like, Mom, that's where I'm shining, and to offer permission, I suppose, you know, permission for us to be creative. Is that sort of the beauty of sitting in those 10 minutes of finding? Yeah.
Well, at some point you have to make an inner commitment to your creativity that you make good on.
Yeah.
You know, that you say to yourself, this is who I am.
Yeah.
I am this creative person, and I'm going to do what it takes to express that. And I think the moment you do that, you enter an exalted field, what I call the genius spiral, just by asking that question. There's a great quotation from one of the apocryphal Gospels, the Gospel of Thomas, which was edited out of the official Bible. But it says, if you bring forth what is within you, what is within you will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you will destroy you. And I think there's absolute truth to that. I've seen so many examples of people really changing their whole lives and even their health by allowing their creativity to flourish.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Well, I cannot believe the time went by so fast. What a phenomenal, for me, interview. And I know that literally my audience is going to go crazy over it, especially all my friends and all my clients. I literally have given people the book and said, we need the same language as, I need you to read Gay's books, even Conscious Loving, because there's a language in there. Language is powerful. And bonding on that and holding each other to your zone of genius, holding each other to, did you check in with that zone of genius, I think is phenomenal. So you're offering so many great gifts to the world. I just want to thank you so much. And I cannot wait for September. I'm going to put it on my calendar and just with a reminder and a countdown.
I'm very excited too. And thank you for sharing the joy. I'll be back in touch when the time comes, and I'm sure we'll talk again.
Oh, sounds fantastic. Thank you so much, Gay. And I hope you have a wonderful day. I'm glad you're home and you're enjoying your home time.
Thank you. Blessings to you.
Okay, you too. Bye.
Bye.